is the big question right now, and it's not a great question to be saying this morning, is the big fear in the market's mind. Have we made some sort of a mini interim top at 12,000 with this event today? Let's take a lot of these points to our set of guests. Saurabh Mukherjee of Marcellus Investment Managers is now with us now. Saurabh, great to have you this morning. It's gone as per script, at least as per the exit poll script, and it's a very solid 300 plus kind of a figure. But where does this really leave the market, the unfinished agenda, the unfinished business? And my question, have we made some sort of an interim top today?
I think at the market level, I think as Prashant was mentioning and as I've highlighted on your channel over the past year, there's good reason to believe that the Nifty as a whole is overshadowed, and within the Nifty, some of the weaker names such as in the PSU banks, the industrial companies, the metals and mining companies who consistently fail to post decent cash flows. I think within the Nifty, there's actually big pockets of overvaluation as well. There are, however, two pockets in the Nifty which I think will run over the next 12 months as well. One is the first pocket, I would say, is the top 4 private sector banks. I think they find themselves peculiarly well placed going into a construct where I don't think the government will be able to recapitalize the PSU banks. I simply don't see the fiscal space for the government to recapitalize the PSU banks. And the NBFC problems, I think, sustain. I think I highlighted them a year ago. They've come through, and I think the NBFC problems sustain. So the big 4 private sector banks with good balance sheets, good CASA franchises, I think will make tons of money in the next couple of years, and therefore the market rally in them will continue. The other space, I dare say, is FMCG. What's very notable about this election is the regional parties have got decimated, and that, I think, will lead the NDA over the next couple of years to redraw India's fiscal landscape and introduce an even more universal social security safety net. So more Ayushman Bharat, more Mahapension, more PM Kisan type programs, which give the NDA far greater fiscal reach than the central government has enjoyed in the last 10-20 years. So that the subtext of the election, which is the decimation of the regional parties, I think has major fiscal ramifications over the next couple of years.
Saurabh, I just wanted to extend that point with regards to PSU banks, because the view is that maybe the big policy initiative will come on PSU banks. Maybe there will be some sort of consolidation, recapitalization could be a problem. So from that perspective, you wouldn't be hopeful that maybe they would be good buys considering the valuation gap as compared to private sector?
I think recapitalization the government's tried before. I think we've had a couple of rounds of that Indradhanush program that was launched 4 years ago, and I think then they tried a revamp of it. I don't see the space, the fiscal space for a meaningful recap which will make a difference to the really big PSU banks, SBI, BOB, PNB, etc. The only potential policy measure I can think of which will galvanize PSU bank stocks on a sort of more fundamental basis than the speculative rally we are seeing today. The only real substantive policy measure is potential privatization of, say, 2 or 3 large PSU banks. I don't think SBI can possibly be privatized as the crown jewel, but below SBI there are 2 or 3 PSU banks. If the government finds the courage to privatize them, that could lead not just to a galvanized performance by PSU banks, but potentially lead to the beginning of the capex rally. The banking sector desperately needs an infusion of fresh capital. The government, I don't think, has the money. Will it allow the private sector to come and infuse that capital? I think those are big questions. We'll know about them through July, August.
Saurabh, hi, morning. Just to go back to the first answer, are you saying that the government will be more socialist in its leanings over the next 5 years? Just to get that first point. Yeah. Sure.
So I think if I was a BJP leader and I look back at the last 2 or 3 years, I think there's a lot of people in the BJP who will attribute this stellar showing in the polls to what is tantamount to a fairly comprehensive social security construct that the BJP has rolled out, the NDA has rolled out over the last couple of years. I think they, more than the Congress, got the whole idea of universal basic income on the table. The Congress responded with the good idea of Nyay, but by that time, Ayushman Bharat was on the table, it was rolled out. PM Kisan, Mahapension got announced in the budget, and to my mind, I think there'll be a big portion of the BJP which will suggest to its leaders that, look, this is the way forward, this is working for us, the country is supporting us. So more than anything else, the message of the last 2-3 years will be that if we do more of this, we can entrench ourselves for another 10 years possibly. Therefore, my take is we will see more socialism rather than the sort of free market capitalism, which gets the market, which gets the stock market really heated up.
So, do you think to deliver the goods in this framework, do you think I mean, in the last 5 years, I think most of these programs have benefited. I mean, most of it has gone through government entities, right? I mean, the delivery of these goods through all these programs. Even the Ujjwala scheme, for example, it was PSU entities which benefited. I'm talking about from a market point of view. I mean, the next, what could be the other programs, and which are the areas to look at which could benefit via the delivery of these programs? Yes.
Sure. So I think the thing to realize is, if a PSU does execute the programs, there is no rational construct in which the government can allow the PSU to make hefty profits out of government-run programs. It doesn't make any sense, right? You're using my money, and I am your shareholder. Why should I let you make lots of money? So I've never quite understood the fascination in India with buying PSU shares. Where I think there will be money made is as more welfare schemes, or a more comprehensive welfare scheme, shall we say. At the moment, we've got piecemeal schemes. We've got Ujjwala, we've got the housing scheme, we've got a healthcare scheme. I think if the NDA is able to stitch these together into a comprehensive social security framework, what you'll potentially see is the poorest 300-400 million people having greater purchasing power. And that could take us back to the sort of world we saw between 2005 and 2011, where you used to get consistently double-digit volume growth for the FMCG names, where you used to get the two-wheeler companies posting consistently double-digit volume growth as well. So two-wheelers and FMCG, I would say, are the biggest potential beneficiaries if the NDA redraws the fiscal construct of the country, creates a comprehensive social security program, and in a way takes away from the state governments a lot of the social security programs the state governments themselves have tried to implement. If the centre grabs that space, I think there's potentially political gains to be had. But from a stock market perspective, FMCG and two-wheelers are the sectors which stand to gain.
Saurabh, it's interesting you say that. Would then you not go with the group that perhaps believes that new government comes in, starts sort of spending aggressively on infrastructure, and then therefore maybe it is actually infra and cement, those kind of economy-facing stocks which are worth playing? What you're suggesting is actually stick to some of the staples to sort of play on the spend on the agri side.
I think it's a valid question. So I think the way I've looked at it, I think government spending on infrastructure was in the last 5 years, barring the last 12 months where they conked it off a little bit because of the fiscal pressures post GST. But government spending on infrastructure in the first 3-4 years of the NDA government was actually quite handsome. And I think we do get back to that. I don't see a major uplift in government infra spends unless the government is able to sell a whole bunch of roads. I think there's been attempts made in the previous 5 years to sell the government constructed roads. If we do see, say, the CPPIBs and the GICs of the world and the Brookfields of the world buying a big chunk of government constructed roads, then that money could in turn give a fillip to the next wave of road programs. It's clear in India the government has to build infrastructure. The private sector can then take it over and run it on a build, own, operate, on the operational basis. So construction risk for the government, and the private sector then runs the asset and makes the annuity stream from it. So unless the government is able to show progress in the next 6 months in selling already constructed assets, I don't quite see where they'll get the extra money to do another upward thrust in infrastructure. I think the base case should be the last 4 years of infrastructure spending pattern continues rather than a further steep vertical lift off in infra spend.
Saurabh, I'm going to shift focus away and ask you about an event then. We have the RBI policy, which is going to be in the first week of June. Now that we have a clear, decisive mandate, what's your sense in terms of what the RBI might do? Because we already have the fiscal deficit targets with us.
So I think there's two things which have I think constrained the RBI's ability to cut rates more aggressively than they have so far. I think Shakti Das has done a decent job on that, but my hunch is he would have wanted to go further. I think the first was the consistent sort of downward pressure on the rupee. We were breaching 70 to the dollar ever so often as oil punched up. So the sort of strength the rupee is shown on the back of the NDA's potential return to par, that could embolden the RBI to shove even more liquidity into the system to cut rates further because of the FX support that foreigners are giving us. The more foreigners put money into India, the more rupee liquidity they soak up, the easier it becomes for RBI to follow a relaxed monetary policy. So this sort of rupee strength, I think, creates a greater room for RBI easing. My reckoning is he was anyway heading for a 25 bips rate cut. I think with the rupee strengthening, potentially there's room for a 50 bips rate cut. I'm no expert on the monsoon. I read the same newspapers as you guys do. But monsoon permitting, I think the RBI should be heading for a 50 bips rate cut. And the state of the financial sector, especially the NBFCs, is such that the financial sector could do with every ounce of liquidity that the RBI can punch into it.
By the way, Saurabh, just coming to you, the market is off from the highs. We've got we're under 11,900 now. I mean, the Nifty will come up on your screen. And it's basically a red candle, which means we've fallen below the opening levels today. So we are now lower than what the market opened at. The high, of course, was at 12,041. And we are at now 11,886. There you go. The Nifty Bank also is showing a similar picture. And you've got, red bars on candles on Nifty mid-cap index, which is, we are below the opening levels, and the small-cap index as well. So, yes, there is some moderation which is coming in as we speak. Actually, we should, for our viewers, just also put up the overall numbers, all India numbers, because, counting is still on. Is that, the market moderation a function of what is happening on that front, the counting? Is there some moderation in the numbers for the NDA? I don't know. We've got state-wise numbers right at the bottom of this, right on the top of the screen, and that is giving you the picture. But this is the all India picture. I don't think there is any. It's actually gotten better. I think 287 is what the BJP is at. The NDA is at 343. So this is down 10 compared to last time. I think there's trends for. We don't have trends for one seat, but 542 out of 543 we have trends for. And the UPA is at about 89, and the Congress is around the 50-ish kind of number compared to 44 last time. In this 89, the big one, of course, is the DMK, which seems to be sweeping Tamil Nadu. But the market's coming off. Nothing to do with what the numbers are indicating. I don't think, at least at this point. 11,851, so just 100 points left now, compared to almost the 270 points that we saw just about an hour ago. Saurabh, another thing I've heard from, again, mostly HNI investors, etc., is the possibility of something like inheritance tax, an estate tax, right? It's not new. It's been spoken about in the last couple of, last 2 years, probably more keenly. And I think people are talking about it because they realize that, the government needs money, right? There was this thing about accessing some of RBI's reserves. We're awaiting the Jalan Committee report. Any thoughts at all?
I think the first layer of tax collection thrust will be GST. It was clear, it's relatively clear that since the Gujarat Assembly elections, 1 year and 8 months ago, the GST collection drive was clearly throttled off. I think GST collection goes on overdrive after the election. Fiscally, India really has no choice. I think that will be the mainstay of the government trying to recover fiscal health by focusing heavily on GST collections. A lot of the carve-outs that were made, the rollbacks that were made, I think will go, and I think there'll be a full focus thrust on collecting GST as aggressively as the government can in the 12 months following the general election. If after that there is further need, there's bound to be some taxes on more affluent people. I have to confess, Prashant, whilst we've been hearing the speculation on estate tax for a couple of years, I really don't know at this stage whether that will be happening in the July budget this year or another budget further down the road. But I have no doubt that there will be a far greater focus on collecting GST revenues than there has been in the last year and a half, where it's very noticeable how weak the GST collections have been in, say, 10 out of 12 months every year.
Okay, the visuals on our screen over there, that's Prime Minister Modi's mother. So we're getting visuals from pretty much across the country. Big day for a lot of people today, including, of course, Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So those are some visuals on your screen. All right, Saurabh, we'll wind it up on that note. Thank you very much for being with us and sharing your thoughts.